It's Monday. You know what that means. Mock Draft Monday here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today on the show is Mock Draft Monday. That's all we're doing today. Luckily, Mondays in April don't tend to have a lot of news to them, so we can just get right into it. If you are new to the exercise, here we do it where I can't take anybody that I have taken in a previous Mock Draft Monday. This will be the fourth week of these in this particular cycle of them. So, for example, I've taken Andrew Booth, I've taken Derek Stingley, I've taken Jordan Davis. Can't do any of those guys. They're off limits. I got to pick somebody else, and that goes all the way through 7 rounds. Used a different draft board and draft machine this time that I usually use, the Pro Football Network simulator. Used the Draft Network this time. Pro Football Networks was on the fritz. So we are, let's just dive right in. And we actually start with a few trades. So I've been looking at it at the board, and I think I've kind of landed that I think I would only trade up for Kyle Hamilton and Sauce Gardner. I would probably, if I was like worried that if I knew that like Derek Stingley was maybe being eyeballed by like the Falcons or Washington or the Commanders or something, like maybe. But I think it's just those two guys. And in this particular sim, both those guys were gone in the top 5. So I let the draft come to me from there. Stingley and Booth were on the board. Can't take them. So instead I traded back. I called up Saints and I traded 98 and 161 and 16 for number 12. So that's a 3rd rounder and a 5th rounder to move back 4 spots in the 1st round. Thought that was super worth it. Then I was at 16 and Kenny Pickett was on the board. And I thought, maybe somebody will trade up here. Maybe there's a QB needy team I can call. So I called up the Steelers and I traded again. I went back to 20 and I got another 3rd rounder and traded 156, a 5th rounder. So I traded a 3rd for a 5th and moved back 4 spots in the 1st round. So all in all, I picked up 2 extra 3rds and moved back 8 spots and ended up picking 20th. And at 20, I still had Trent McDuffie on the board, so I went and took him. Trent McDuffie, corner out of Washington, is somebody we talked about a little bit before. He's sort of a difficult eval because he's very heady and he's very good at reading plays and he's very smart. He's a very cerebral cornerback. He has a very kind of mental chess match sort of game. He isn't the biggest dude out there. He has a short arm thing, and there's a lot of discussion about like what does short arms mean. To me, it means that's gonna mean a struggle when you press. That doesn't necessarily mean like poor contested catch ability. Guys that are smaller can play bigger than they are. It seems like he does play a little bigger than, I mean, not like super extreme, but it seems like he does overcome it reasonably, but it's more like a difficulty pressing. And he never pressed in Washington. I'm not familiar enough with Washington to know if that's like a Washington thing or if that was specifically take care of Trent McDuffie thing, but it was a lot of off, a lot of bail. They played a lot of cover 3 there, and it was a lot of kind of back off, read the quarterback, and then close. And try to make a play on the ball that way. There's a production concern and stuff like that. All this is like stuff that implies things about Trent McDuffie that I don't know are true, because he's a very sticky corner and he is very good and talented and agile at the things he needs to be good and talented at. So I was okay taking him at 20, especially after functionally picking up 2 extra 3rd rounders, very similar to what the Vikings did last year, picking up 2 3rd rounders to move back 8 spots in the draft. And what that does is it gives me a whole bunch of ammo to move up for future picks, right? So the board was falling really, really interestingly. There was a lot of linemen. I believe it was Kenyon Green was on the board up until like pick 39 or something. I actually tried to trade up, didn't work out. So he ended up going just in front, but Nakobe Dean kept falling. And I think most people agree that he's like a 1st round pick, late first. He's not a top 10 guy or anything, but most people put him in the 1st round or at least close to it, so that he is falling into the middle of the 2nd round. I'm like, this is value now. So he was at 44. The Ravens are up at 45. I didn't think he would get past the Ravens, so I traded up with Cleveland at 44. It took nothing, took a 6th rounder, no big deal, and got Nakobe Dean, linebacker out of Georgia. And Nakobe Dean, I'm going to steal what Charles McDonald said on his podcast, The Exemplist. People are overthinking him, I think. he's like an unbelievably rangy middle linebacker. The kind of like I think of this as like the old school Tampa 2 middle linebacker that like functionally was a third safety, the Brian Urlacher kind of mold, where you can just cover so much more and you can cover the entire middle of the field. And that's what happened with Georgia. And it helped Georgia be really, really successful on the outside. One of their corners, at least, was like kind of struggling, and that they still had this unbelievable defense kind of because the linebacker could take a lot of the assignment away, and that cornerback could have an easier job. It's a great way to take care of a cornerback if you can just assign more range and more space to Nakobe Dean. And he was running a cover 7 system over there, what Zimmer used to run, all those complexities, all that stuff that's supposed to be really hard for a young kid to pick up. He had it, and he had it down. I think Brett Coleman called him a scalpel, not a hammer, because he's smaller. And so he's not going to be a big block shedding guy. He's not going to be, your big giant set the edge, your freakish athletic type, but he's really rangy. He's really heady. He knows where to be. He's got good tackles and stuff. So, except when his size gets the better of him, there is a size concern with him that doesn't bother me a lot at linebacker, honestly. Because it'll matter a little bit in run defense, but in pass defense, it's a lot more about parking yourself in the right place and just being a presence there, being a jersey of the wrong color, so the quarterback has to adjust his read accordingly, than it is actually having the size. Linebackers don't get into jump ball contested catch situations nearly as often as receivers and cornerbacks do. Those balls are going to the outside of the perimeter, they're fades and stuff. You're not throwing a jump ball over the middle of the field. It sounds like a great way to get picked off by a safety, right? So I like Nakobe Dean. I think he will be very good for a team as long as they don't ask him to be something that he's not. And I don't think you have to ask him to be something that he's not in most defenses. So I went with Nakobe Dean at pick number 44. Ended up picking up, again, I got 2 extra 3rd rounders and I've swapped 5ths with somebody. We'll get to that later. And then we move on to round 3. Look, you can bet on the draft. Did you know that? You can go to betonline.net and gamble on the draft. You can gamble on who's going to be the first pick, who's going to be the first lineman off the board, or the first, wide receiver, the first corner off the board, stuff like that. You can gamble on who certain teams will pick, where will Malik Willis end up, all that stuff. Or you can just go bet a win total, Vikings are at 8.5 right now. I certainly have my opinion about that. Because they're going to be starting some rookies that they probably would rather not be forced to start. So I'm going to be honest, I hammered the under on that. And if you would like to join me in this emotional hedge, you can head over to betonline.net. It's not just football. You can bet on basketball, hockey, playoffs going on there, of course, softball, tennis, golf. You could have been betting on the Masters. You can bet on whatever you want, or you can do live bets or player props and stuff. You can do crazy things like bet on who will score the next basket in this game in the middle of the game. Super cool stuff. So head on over to betonline.net and get yourself a gambling. BetOnline, where the game starts. Moving on with this Mock Draft Monday. In this one, I have a very robust 3rd round. I have 3 picks in the 3rd round. So let's get into them. And the first one is our natural pick, number 77. This is the one we always get. And for this one, I want to talk about Kingsley Enagbare. He is an edge rusher out of South Carolina. And you would probably think of him right now as like the DJ Wonnum role, kind of an undersized, sort of hybrid edge type thing. That's like maybe where you'd slot him in if you just looked up his height and weight. I have a different plan for him. So here's the deal. His whole skill set is that he's long and strong. So he's got length, he's got arm length and stuff, and he packs a really powerful punch. He doesn't quite have the bulk, I think, to keep that up at the NFL level. And he certainly doesn't have like pass rush finesse. He's not just going to be your stand-up edge rusher. So I want to move him to the inside a little bit to be that base defensive end, I guess, in a 3-4 that sort of, we would probably be more familiar with it as a defensive tackle. I think like the Sheldon Richardson role, he did that for a long time for the Jets in the post-Rex Ryan era. That is the role that I envision for him. And for that, I'm going to ask him to bulk up. So I want him to put on a little bit of weight and bulk up, and we'll use the strength training program to do that. But that's all I like. I don't need him to bulk up and learn a new thing and become a totally different player. I just want to have a little bit of extra beef on him, and then he can use that powerful punch, and he knows how to use his length and stuff, and hopefully he can become a better edge setter than he is now. And I think that could actually become a starting level player, which is pretty good in the third round. There are a couple other edges I actually kind of wish that I had taken here. We'll talk about them another day. For now, let's go on to pick number 84. Which is the pick that I got from, I believe, from Pittsburgh for trading down when they traded up with me for Kenny Pickett. With that, I am taking Marcus Jones, cornerback out of Houston. He's another guy. It's kind of similar to McDuffie, where he's a little bit too. I mean, he's 5'8". Like, this is too small of a guy, but he plays way, way bigger than that. And so I think this is one of those things where teams might overreact to how small he is. He's not a first round player because of this, but I think he can be a third round player because of this, and that's where I'm taking him. So he's a sticky athlete. He's very, very willing in the run game. And look, I'm going to always have a soft spot for that because of Antoine Winfield and watching him growing up, who was a similarly really, really small dude, and he would just pop guys. And I loved that, and I kind of am chasing that a little bit. And Antoine Winfield played outside corner. Most people are going to slot him into the nickel. I would try it outside in camp and see if he's really getting bodied by bigger receivers. I'm actually taking one later in the draft that we can test this against, right? And just go throw a couple fades up, see what happens in a red zone drill. But yeah, I think this is a guy that's got some potential to work out. If not, special teamer, rotational nickel type. But I think the fact that he plays as a better run defender than he is small means he's going to fall further than he deserves to. And I think he has fallen further than he deserves to. So I actually like the value here at pick number 84. And now we've got two cornerbacks. Whether or not they can play outside is a bit of a thing. So we're going to have a bit of a competition here. Dantzler, McDuffie, and Marcus Jones will probably all compete to see who the outside guy is. And then whoever doesn't win that becomes the nickel, right? Unless it's Dantzler, then he probably just becomes a backup. But then, you kind of figure out the nickel afterwards. But either way, I think we have a rotation we can sort of work with, which that brings me to one of my favorites. I think he was one of the prospects of the day previously. It's Cole Strange, a guard out of Chattanooga. He's a big, mean mauler, and he's only here because Chattanooga is a small school. Super easy. We're picking him at 98. That's the pick we got from the Saints for the first trade down. So you can think about the trade down. And ignoring my rules that I wasn't able to take Derek Stingley anyways. Let's say that I chose not to take Derek Stingley. This is the thing that I was talking about last week, where I can kind of say, okay, what if we did this? How does it feel? So let's say we say, nah, I don't want Derek Stingley. I like the depth at corner in this draft, and we'll get one a little later in the first round. And Andrew Booth went. He was also off limits, but he went. Derek Stingley went, and I traded past both of them and ended up with Trent McDuffie. So this is how that feels. How does that feel? We ended up with Trent McDuffie instead of Derek Stingley. So quantify whatever the difference is between those players. And then for our trouble, you got Marcus Jones and a guard in Cole Strange. And in a roundabout way, we had enough late round capital that I felt pretty good giving up pick 184, our first 6th round pick, to move up for Nakobe Dean as well. So we have a lot more speed and a lot more agility on our defense than we used to have. We have this kind of young core of hybrid-ish players that seems to kind of be the next wave, that everybody can do everything sort of confusion that a Fangio-style defense that we are going to have now is angling at. And I think we have that now. I like the trade down, I think. I definitely like Derek Stingley a lot more than Trent McDuffie. If it's just picking one of those two, I'm picking Stingley every time. But McDuffie plus Jones plus Cole Strange is a pretty attractive package to me. While I'm here, by the way, so we're going to do a lot of cool draft stuff. If you have been a fan of the network, of the Locked On Network, you know about the ultimate mock draft we do. It'll be a separate podcast feed that goes up that you'll have to subscribe to separately. But all of the Locked On hosts of all of the different teams got together, did it. We're in the middle of it actually right now, doing a mock draft and put it together, and then we'll release that as a podcast. So, Vikings up at 12, blah, blah, blah. Trades are in and all of that stuff. Super, super cool stuff. So go check that out. We're going to do hopefully a live thing as well. All the details are still getting worked out there. So stay tuned for that. Really exciting stuff. I also want to talk to you about the best tasting protein bar on the planet. It is Built Bar. Built Bars are energy bars covered in 100% chocolate made out of collagen protein, which makes them a miracle because they can taste super sweet, super delicious. They can taste like a real candy bar, but be a fraction of the diet ruiner. There's only like 130 calories, only like 4 grams of sugar in one of these bad boys, and then like 17 grams of protein. It absolutely rules. They come in a whole bunch of super dope flavors like chocolate caramel, chocolate orange, raspberry, cookies and cream. There's a mint chocolate one, a peanut butter one. That's my favorite. They also have Built Puffs, which are like a marshmallowy one. That's like marshmallow churro puff. Who doesn't want that? Or a key lime pine puff. And it tastes like a marshmallow candy bar, like something you would get for Easter. It rules. So head on over to built.com, enter promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you can get 15% off of your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. Moving on with today's Mock Draft Monday. It's day 3, and now we are in a fairly normal day 3 situation, pretty chalk. We've traded away one of our 6th rounders to move up in one of the trades in the second round, but otherwise it's more or less normal. Our 5th round pick is now 161 instead of 156. Sorry, everybody. I moved it back 5 spots in all the first round pick trading. I know you're mad. I know you're furious at me, and I deeply apologize. I will be releasing an iPhone note statement on Twitter tomorrow, and I sincerely and profusely apologize for that. But with that pick, I got somebody I'm actually like pretty stoked on in JT Woods out of Baylor. I like JT Woods a lot because there's a lot of options here for how to go with him, and I don't know what the coaches are going to want, but whatever it is, I can see him fitting that bill. So he is a fairly rangy safety that has decent ability to read plays and generate interceptions. You might remember him for getting a pick in the Senior Bowl, like in the actual game. But his deal is he's a little bit long and lean, so he's not going to be, this big bulky dude that's going to, terrorize tight ends or anything like that in the run game. And he's got a little bit of a confidence thing, I think, when it comes to when to go. He's got, if you read his scouting report, there's stuff like indecisive as a tackler or, just a step late to plays sometimes. And to me, that is a guy that just needs to commit. And so if I can give him a little confidence, if I can get him reading the play a little faster and reading and feeling it a little bit, I think a lot of his problems evaporate. Now, that's a difficult task. That's a really, really tough thing to do. That is not a trivial coaching thing, and that's why he's here in the 5th round. But as a 5th round safety, I like that as a probable backup, but he would compete with Cameron Bynum if you ask me. I don't think that should be too hard for Cameron Bynum to beat him, and if he can't, then we're probably glad that guy's not starting. But he's only a 3-year starter from college, and so he can get some extra experience, and if he can speed up his processing a little bit before Harrison Smith retires, we have a decent suitor for that job. We didn't have to spend much on it, so I like JT Woods in the 5th round. Moving on to the 6th round, we now have back-to-back picks, 191 and 192. Usually we would have 184, but again, I traded it away to move up in the second round to get Nakobe Dean. So first off, we have Justin Ross, a wide receiver out of Clemson. This is very much a size guy. I don't like size guys a lot. I want to talk about the wide receivers this week because one of them, Drake London, is like a size guy, and it's just really interesting. Like, what does it mean to be really good at contested catches and have a high volume of contested catches and stuff? There's like a conversation to be had there. Next up at pick 191, remember we have our back-to-back 6th rounders here. No pick at 184. Remember, I traded that up for Nakobe Dean. But at 191, I'm going with Justin Ross out of Clemson. He's a really interesting one. This is an injury medical red flag guy. He's 6'3", he's 210. He's got a lot of really good contested catch ability. He's got a lot of competition. He's got a fluid stride. He's got a lot of really good stuff. 4'6", 340, that ain't great. That's what Irv Smith ran. So that's he's not the fastest guy, and he probably won't be able to burn anybody out. But he could be, at least a good kind of rotational, good role player type receiver. The problem is he has missed a lot of time with injury. He had a bulging disc and congenital fusion condition in his neck. So we've talked a lot about neck and back injuries and why those are so scary. It's because they can re-aggravate at any time. They might seem fully healed, maybe even for years, and you wouldn't even know that it's still at risk. He had that in March of 2020, and he also had a stress fracture in his foot in 2021. The latter doesn't have a lot to do with the former, which means I personally am not going to be as concerned about it as others might be. But either way, that is something to take a look at. But here in the 6th round, I'm okay with taking that. If he never plays, and it's a Greg Child situation and he just doesn't do anything and I'm just out one of my back-to-back sixths, I'm okay with putting those chips on the table. That's a bet I'm willing to lose if that makes sense. And the upside is you get a wide receiver that's worth way more than a 6th round pick. At 192, I'm taking Isaac Taylor Stewart, a cornerback out of USC, who is sort of a very opposite guy. He's like Unreal Toolsy. This is very different from the guys that I've been selecting so far that aren't necessarily the best athletes, but are very polished. This dude is all tools. He's all potential. He is a total flyer. And if you can teach him everything about the sport, he becomes an excellent elite corner with unbelievable athleticism. But the path to get there is so difficult that he's going to be available here in round 6. And I love taking a stab or two like this in the 3rd round, especially at cornerback where we're going to need a lot. So I have now taken 3 cornerbacks in this draft, and I would do it again. I kind of hope the Vikings do that because they need a lot of depth. 1 year of Patrick Peterson is not going to, it's flex tape on the Hoover Dam. They need a lot more than that. They need something structural. So tripling down on cornerback here in this draft is something I wholeheartedly support. Taylor Stewart also has a mentality that I really like in corners. He's very cocky, he's confident, he knows it. And I always think corners need to have that because corners need to do things that don't make sense. They need to jump routes that are absolutely irresponsible to jump. They need to play way more aggressively than what feels safe. And so they need to have enough faith in their own abilities to be able to do that with reckless abandon. Otherwise, you just end up with a situation like kind of what we've been watching for the last 2 years in Minnesota, where they play way too far off and everything gets caught 2 yards in front of them, but you make the tackle and it's all conservative. And that's a conservative way to play corner. It hasn't worked. Give me dogs that have absolutely no grip on reality. That is Isaac Taylor Stewart, because he has no idea what he's doing. His technique's all over the place. He's absolutely not a polished dude at all, and he's not nearly game ready. Might not even be make the team ready. This dude needs a year on the scout team, and I'm okay with that at pick 192. On to the 7th round, pick number 250. I'm taking Amare Barno, an edge out of Virginia Tech. So I was a little sketchy about making this one because he is getting mocked about 100 picks above this. So it might just be a quirk of the Draft Network's board that he was even available. It might be too unrealistic to really consider him as a 7th round pick. But down in day 3, I'm a little bit less strict about that stuff. And I do want to talk about the guy, so I'll just take it. So he is very raw and he is very small, but he is twitchy as hell. This dude's insane. He just is Scrappy Doo and he wants to fight you. He's gotten his fair share of motor production, motor pressures, where he just kind of outduels and outfights, and he's very quick and agile and that kind of thing. I wouldn't trust him to set an edge. He just doesn't have the bulk for that. You wouldn't. He has a lot more athletic gifts than his production sort of implies. Like, he is not living up to his potential, which you might see as a red flag. Some might see as potential to unlock as a way to get this guy for cheap and then turn him into something more, depending on how confident your coach is, or how confident you are in your coaching. So I don't mind this as a 7th rounder. He hopefully should be able to get going on special teams. I mean, he's 247, 6'4", 247, and he ran a 4.3 40. So this is sort of a crazy punt coverage pick, a little bit of a special teams pick. But that's a big thing for me in day 3. Because again, I think one thing we don't think about enough with draft picks is what's their path forward? How do they earn the development that they need? This dude needs development. How does he get there? And it's by making the team on special teams and being on the 53-man roster. You're not necessarily on the scout team. You're developing, you're actually getting coaching, you're repping, you're maybe even getting rotational reps because you made the team on special teams, and you're actually getting to dress on game day. That kind of means, to justify that, you have to be in the game a little bit, and that will be valuable experience. So this is a little bit more of a special teams pick than it is like a true edge rusher, let's get a depth piece kind of pick. But in the 7th round, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And plus, special teams in terms of value sort of is the 7th round of things, if that makes sense. A 7th round pick that you spend on special teams on a guy that, could become a scrimmage player later, but might just top out as a special teamer, to me, that's getting your money's worth because he makes the team. A 7th rounder that makes the team, you did a good job. And I think he can make the team on special teams just off athleticism alone, as long as he's willing to learn it. So that's the mock draft. We tripled down on corner. That's probably the headline. We traded up for Nakobe Dean. We traded down twice. We got an edge rusher we need to bulk up. We got a guard we absolutely do not need to bulk up, and he's super dope. We have some project players. We have some red flag players that we've got a lot of kind of high upside swings of the bat in day 3. And so I'm excited about this one. This is my favorite mock draft Monday I've done so far. So I don't know. I hope this is closer to the kind of thing that happens. And I think part of it is because I use the TDN mock simulator, which is a little bit more easy mode. They let you get away with more trades and stuff that make things go well. But also I think part of it is I just see corner as this thing you need 3 of. Like, I just feel like they need to do so many of them. Not necessarily they must have Sauce Gardner, but it's like they must have 3 of these guys, whichever 3 they are. So, feels pretty good. Tomorrow's Twitter Tuesday. I will answer all your questions. You can send them to me at Luke Brown NFL on Twitter, at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. You can send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. You can also fill out the Google form, which is in the show notes if you'd rather that for like more long form stuff. So I will talk to you about all of that stuff then. In the meantime, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Get to know even more of these guys. Expand your board, expand your knowledge base. I will talk to y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.